Hello, everyone. Welcome to Between Two Studs. I'm Alex Studd.
And I'm Ron Studd.
And Ron, for episode 39, we have a musician on the show. I don't think we've ever had a musician before, right?
Nope, I don't think so. This will be our first.
So the first, Liam Hathaway, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being on. As is tradition, Ron and I are going to thank you for being on the show. We're going to have a shot of Malort, our favorite beverage in the world,
Heck yeah.
who also is the official sponsor of Between Two Studs Season 2. So cheers to you, Liam.
Before you guys do that, I actually have a surprise.
Sure. Oh.
Okay.
I got a bottle of Malort.
You found some Malort.
Wait, how did you get a bottle?
So I scoured the internet and called a few liquor stores, and there was one in Vancouver that actually had them in stock. So I drove up there and got a bottle.
No way!
Wow.
So this will be my first time.
Cool.
Oh, wow. Even better.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this is fantastic. So wait, so we're, for those who are watching this, the recording of it, you'll be able to watch the facial expression of Liam having his first shot of Malort ever, right?
Yeah.
This is incredible.
Alex, I know that we've already got our clip for this episode.
That's true. All right, Liam, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Wait,
cheers.
Wait, let me look at that. I gotta see how big that pour is there. Is that... That's not yeah, that's a pretty heavy pour. Well,
I'm used to heavy pours.
Okay. Well, I like your enthusiasm.
All right. Well, cheers. Very impressed that you went the extra mile for this one.
Heck yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
It's good. I like it.
No,
yeah!
really?
It's not as strongly flavored as I thought it would be.
So I'm shocked you were able to get it in Vancouver, Washington. That's what you said. It was at a liquor store.
Mm-hmm. There's this massive liquor store up there called Total Wine that I've never been to before, but it's the size of a Safeway, and it's full of any kind of alcohol you could ever imagine. So they had it.
That's fantastic. Well, and we're going to get into it, but I'm actually not that shocked in some ways because I'm shocked that you got it, but I'm not totally shocked that the Portland, Oregon area might have it, right? Because I think of Portland, Oregon, it's a little bit hipster, it's a little bit of a, down for anything, and I feel that Malort is sort of being exported to cities like Portland, cities like Denver, but I'm still very impressed that you got it. So what a great surprise to start the show.
Yeah, I've been excited to drink it for the past week.
And now you have that bottle. You can savor it.
And I'm glad it doesn't go to the point either. And your reaction was awesome. I've seen so many bad reactions. So your reaction to be yeah, that's pretty good. I'm impressive. Very impressive.
I do like bitter things, so it makes sense.
And it definitely is that. So, well, incredible. That was our toast, but you participated in it for the beginning of what we call the Ember Round. So, fantastic. I don't know where to go from here, except let's dive right into the round. So, I alluded to this a little bit, right? We talked about Portland, Oregon, but what's the story? We always like to ask our guests, how did you end up on this show? How did you meet, in this case, how did you meet me?
Well, I was out at the 1905 with one of my friends, which is a music venue in Portland, and we had just seen a show, Nicole Glover Quartet, I think is what it was, and it was maybe midnight. My friend and I walked 2 blocks up the street to Prost, which is a German bar, and we just sat down at the bar, and there was Alex sitting next to us, and he just started talking to us, and I could tell that Alex was a special guy right away. And
well, it was funny because that, Liam, was my first night in the state of Oregon. I had never been. I had just landed, And even though, I mean, it was midnight in Oregon, so my brain was 2 a.m. in Chicago. But for some reason, just being there, I had this like burst of energy and excitement. And I looked over to you and the other gentleman, Zach, and I immediately looked at Zach, and I looked at myself, and I'm like, I know it's late, and maybe I was like, this guy's got to be a giant. And so I don't normally like to ask people their height because I find it to be kind of rude because I'm tall myself. But I said, listen, I got to ask. How tall are you? I was thinking, oh, maybe he'll say 6'4", 6'5". He stood up. 6'10", right?
I think he's 6'11".
This guy.
Wow.
I said, whoa. And I said, let's talk. I got things to talk to you guys about.
Yeah, I've known him for...
You've known him... Sorry.
I've known him for a long time, since 3rd grade. And I used to be taller than he was. And I'm only like 6'3". For a long time, I was taller than he was. And then in high school, he just shot up and, now he's a giant.
Yes. I hope he doesn't mind. He's saved in my phone as Zach the Giant. 'Cause I hope he doesn't mind that. But, it was so cool meeting you that night. That was my first night in Oregon. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. But then we met up the next night. And that was my first time ever in the state of Washington. So my connections with Oregon and Washington will always be linked to Liam and with Zach. So thank you.
Yeah, it was great to meet you. I just wanted to keep hanging out with you because you're such an interesting guy. It was a real pleasure.
So Liam, tell us about what are some of your passions and areas of interest?
Well, first of all, I'm a musician. I've kind of always been a musician, and I also love to cook. And I used to garden a lot when I had a farm, but now I live in an apartment, so I can't do that any longer. But yeah, music is my number one.
Very cool.
And outside of the Malort that you just had, what are you currently drinking right now?
I have an Ardbeg 10-year Scotch. This is like probably my favorite drink ever. It tastes like kind of like Sharpies, That's what I love about it.
You're not kidding. You love that it tastes like Sharpies.
Yeah, it's like Sharpies and leather and stuff. I love Negronis because they kind of taste like mothballs in an old closet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Ron, what are you working on over there?
I'm still doing water, but end of this week, I am totally done with this challenge. So I am totally going back to having some good bourbon on the show. So just wait. I'm waiting for it. What about you, Alex?
I was thinking about this. First time having a musician on, I said I should change it up too. And I've noticed every episode, I think, Ron, that we've done, I've always had straight liquor. What I mean by that is it's not been a cocktail. So tonight, for one of the last cold days in Chicago, is it like, there's whispers of it getting warmer. I'm having a rusty nail, which for those who don't know what a rusty nail is, it is Scotch, but also Drambuie. I find it to be an absolutely delicious beverage, especially when it's cool. A little cold night, this warms you right up.
What is Drambuie?
So we may have touched on this before. Now that I mentioned this, but I don't think I've had it on the show. Drambuie, and I didn't Google it last time, and I should have. But Ron, keep me honest. It's like a honey liqueur. It's a honey infused Scotch, so it's still made in Scotland. But what's kind of nice about it is the peatiness of a traditional Scotch is sort of balanced out by the sweetness from the honey, and it has a really nice blended beverage. I find it to be very delicious.
It blends really, really nicely with Scotch, and I don't know if you would ever have it with anything besides Scotch, but it has a really nice way of I think was it last season or maybe earlier this season, you talked about it, Alex, where especially when you're first getting into whiskey, it was something where, it was kind of a good introduction because it softened some of that really strong peaty notes that are almost a little bit too burny, if that makes sense. And then over time, it's like, you just kind of cut down a little bit of how much Drambuie, and it makes it a really good way to kind of ease your way into enjoying Scotch as well.
Yeah, it's sort of like training wheels for enjoying Scotch. For people who might be listening, or Liam, if you have friends who are like, I hate the taste of Scotch, and you might say, well, you know what? Why don't you have it with Drambuie, and over time, just turn down the percentage of the Drambuie, and then you can really enjoy the Scotch on its own. And I do enjoy Scotch on its own, but I also enjoy having the rusty nail from time to time, too. So.
What kind of Scotch are you mixing it with?
So because the honey liqueur is the Drambuie is pretty strong in terms of flavor, I don't actually think you need a particularly. I wouldn't want to waste a really good Scotch on it. So normally,
Right.
I'll do like a Dewar's White, right? Very just like nothing special. If I'm gonna drink Scotch on its own, I'm obviously gonna get something a little bit nicer, like a Glenfiddich or something along those lines, right? So
Yeah.
Monkey Shoulder, I think I've had on this program before, is actually one of my all-time favorite, like dollar for dollar value drinks. Have you ever had Monkey Shoulder?
Yeah, I think I've tasted it. I wasn't a huge fan of it.
What kind of scotches? Yeah, go ahead.
I really like Glenmorangie for a lighter Scotch. I don't know if you've had that one. It's kind of like a more honey, vanilla kind of flavors. But then, I really love Ardbeg because it's just the total opposite of that. Super dark and smoky and peaty.
Well, listen, I don't think... I like to think I've had a lot of Scotch, but in reality, I know I haven't. And I'm going to Scotland in May, so if you have ideas,
cool.
Scotches that I need to have, let me know.
I'm not that well informed either.
The great part about spirits in general is the best way to get knowledgeable is to just partake and enjoy more. Just do it responsibly. That's my only ask. All right?
That's our little PSA for the night.
Right. So, Liam, our next question for you. So we ask all of our guests this. Pick a piece of art that really speaks to you or really maybe defines you in a way, and tell us about that.
So, my favorite piece of art is going to be an album. I know a lot of your guests do albums. It would be Mal Waldron's Up Pop the Devil. It has Reggie Workman and Billy Higgins on it. And I really love it because there's 4 pieces on it, two tracks on each side. And the first 2 tracks kind of have a similar theme. And they play off this theme in just a great way, and it kind of shows how a trio should work together as a single being, And then the third and fourth track have another theme that they work through in a similar way. But it's just kind of like a whole enveloped piece of art that I just love because of that. It's like a whole unit. And they just play together so well. So I highly suggest listening to that.
I was going to say, I don't know that album. What's when was that created? What's the era? What's sort of the background?
It's 60s. It's kind of poorly recorded, but I just love it.
Sure.
It's got its own appeal because of that. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, and I don't know that many jazz albums, to be honest with you, but for some reason I thought you were going to say Bitches Brew.
I do love Bitches Brew. Yeah.
So that's cool, though. I definitely, anytime a guest mentions an album, and it does come up, you're right, I do like to go listen to that album. Got that one.
Very cool.
And then last question in the Ember round, Liam, is we always like to ask our guests how the last 2 years of COVID, what has been something that has happened that maybe has changed your life permanently, ideally for the better, in a positive way that maybe you hadn't originally anticipated?
Well, I'll give you a positive and a negative.
All right, here we go.
So 2019, I was in my second year at PSU in the music program at Portland State, and I was just starting to get, having 5-6 gigs a week. So like being able to actually make a decent income as a musician. And then COVID hit. All the gigs flew out the window. Nobody had any gigs. And I got kind of trapped at my grandma's farm. So we went hardcore and had no people coming in or out. We quarantined the groceries. This is kind of ridiculous now that I look back at it now, but none
of us knew.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't know what was going on. And I didn't have any gigs for maybe 8 or 9 months. And then I'd have one, and then maybe one every couple months. And now it's just starting to come back. But except for this month, for some reason, I have no gigs. But last month I had like maybe 6 or 7, which is nice. But it's forced me to get a day job, which I've never had to do in my life.
Ooh.
So I've been working in kitchens and stuff.
Okay.
But a positive light, I met my partner like a month into COVID. We were talking over Tinder, and we kind of secretly met up at the neighbor's farm. They would drive over, and we would camp out in a tent. And that's how we developed our relationship for a couple months until my mom was more comfortable with having people over and stuff. And now we live together.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think one of those things with our pandemic that we're going to look back on, and I don't think I had heard about it until somebody on this episode brought it up, or somebody on the show. I did, quarantine the groceries a little bit, sprayed them down, wore my mask and all that. But I didn't know that some people were sanitizing their mail and putting it in the oven. I was like, I never did that.
I knew people who did that. They would put it in the oven at like 200 degrees for like 5 hours.
Wow.
And that was, we didn't know how it spread, right?
Right.
I mean, I live in a high rise, and I remember people talking about, the air ducts that they share. If someone above me, had it, could it travel that way? I mean, no one knew. It was scary. But that's, Liam, I appreciate you even the negative.
Right.
You gave a positive spin on it, right? Which is like, it gave you an opportunity to learn more about farming. It gave you an opportunity to experience something else, even if it's not what you want to do. It's an experience, right?
Yeah, being in that kind of doomsday mindset makes you, rack up your skills and on how to survive. So I was growing more food and stocking up on supplies, and fortunately we had a well, so I wasn't worried about water, and we had fireplaces, like wood stoves.
I was gonna say,
so we had heating.
God forbid you would have outlived us all. You would have
absolutely.
I have to ask, because I'm envisioning in my brain, I'm like, painting the picture of you. What kind of farm was it? Is it?
So it was a farm that my grandmother had purchased back in the 70s, and like my mom and her siblings had all grown up there, and it was like a 45-acre cherry and walnut farm.
Oh wow!
And my grandmother farmed it for all the way up until like 2005, and then she kind of became too old to be able to do all the work, and so like then she sold the place on a life lease, which meant that she got to live there until she died, and she got like a lump sum of cash, and she sold it to a vineyard that was down the street, and they turned all the orchards into vines. And so that was the last, few years there until she died last year. And then we lost the property about a year ago now. Which really
I
sucks,
see, because
it was,
once she passed,
then we had 6 months
once she passed,
to get
you
out.
lost possession.
Yeah.
I see. Got it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a bummer, but at least you have the memories, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I can still go out to my old neighbor's property out there. She has a big vineyard and old barn and stuff out there, and she says I can come out there anytime. So it's kind of a little painful to go out there, though.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Liam, I never doubted you for a moment. You passed the Ember round. Yeah, we've mastered it now. Ron's doing a good job there. All right, hey, so Liam, on to the bulk of the questions. We want to get into a little bit more of your passion for music. You talk about your musician. We talked about jazz music, but I don't even think we talked about what instrument you play. Can you talk about what instrument you play? What your journey through how you became a musician?
So I started kind of how any kid starts. When I was a child, my mother had me take piano lessons. My dad bought me a guitar that later I totally destroyed by pulling out the frets and trying to do something weird with it. But
whoa!
But then I started playing tuba in middle school, and I got really into tuba. Like all the way through high school, I thought I wanted to be a symphonic musician, be part of a symphony playing tuba. But then once I got to high school, the band director just shoved a bass in my hands, like an upright bass, and I was like, "Here, play this." Because I was a tuba player, I knew how a bass is supposed to function, like in the bass range, and so yeah, he shoved that into my hands, and I started to fall in love with it, and now I'm a bass player primarily.
And did they start you on like a 3/4, or they go full bass for you? Because it helps you're tall too, right?
Yeah, 3/4 size bass.
Okay.
But
gotcha.
A lot of people think that means how tall the bass is, but actually that means how wide the body is.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So the string length is the same scale as like a full size bass. It's just how wide the body is.
Huh. I didn't know that either. Let me ask you kind of a silly question, Liam, and I'm sorry I don't know this. Any of my music friends are going to cringe hearing this. Being able to play the upright bass, if I were to give you like a bass in a rock band, I mean, is it the same chord structure, same string structure?
You mean like an electric bass? Like here, I actually have one here, like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, exactly.
Yeah, no,
I'm glad you had it there.
Yeah, I can play electric bass too. I don't feel as fluent on it. Like just playing upright feels more natural to me.
But the structure is outside of it being horizontal. Is it identical in terms of the actual?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Yeah, the strings are all tuned the same, and it's essentially the same instrument.
So you in the Pacific Northwest, you could be doing jazz music one day as a bassist, and then be in a grunge rock band the next day. No problem. You got it.
Theoretically, yeah.
That's cool. Well, so that leads me to ask, why jazz? I mean, yes, the upright bass, you fell in love with it. Why specifically, if you could all of a sudden be an electric bassist, what drew you to jazz?
I've always kind of been that person that wants to do things that are out of the ordinary. Like, oh, everybody else likes this stuff, so I'm going to like this other small fringe of things. And so I think that's one thing that kind of drew me to jazz, is because it's different. And I just love the music. My dad always put on Miles Davis Kind of Blue every morning at like 7 a.m, like before I go to school.
Every morning?
Yeah. So
Wow.
I'd always hear that. So I'd always hear that album, and I think that had some sort of influence over me. And like my first music that I really loved was the Beatles. I used to be like hardcore Beatles fan when I was a kid, and I just kind of evolved from there. Started listening to like 20s Dixieland jazz. And I loved that, and then I just kind of started progressing, on the timeline of jazz. Like, so I listened to 20s, and then I started listening to 40s and 50s jazz, and I just kind of started listening to later and later stuff, more complex stuff, and I'm not really sure though exactly what makes me love it. I just do.
Well, it's cool the foundational level, right? When you can listen to, I mean, that's why I fell in love with the Beatles. Is everything after that has a foundation that's based on that. So if you have an appreciation for 1920s jazz, I mean, everything goes on top of that. It's all building blocks, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I think say with jazz, I mean, one of the cool things I like about it is, and I really like Coltrane, A Love Supreme, just how I feel like, I don't know, there's something about the mood that you can convey with jazz that is so kind of organic and it just has a natural flow, whereas I feel like a lot of other genres of music, you're kind of set up for, here's your 2 or 3 minutes of song, and you can be, I don't know, I feel like there's much more room for expression and improvisation too, that can really convey a mood. At least, I don't know, that's kind of my own thing, maybe. Would you agree with that, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very organic compared to other types of music. You have people a lot of the time using acoustic instruments. There's no editing done in the studio. They just go in and they play, and it's just like how you would see, live music.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so much room for change.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one reason why I kind of hate using genre names, because saying jazz gives people a certain impression, like, oh, I don't like jazz, because they hear that word and they associate it with something specific, whether that's like people being uptight.
I think
or
a lot of people.
Yeah, go on.
I think a lot of people think jazz and they're like, elevator music.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I think that's what it's true though. It's like, what is rock, right? Like when you say rock, that can mean so
anything.
many things.
Yeah,
well, I mean, shoot, you saw Dolly Parton the other day. She was inaugurated, or not? She was nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and she sent this memo. She's like, I appreciate the nomination. I don't really produce rock. Please give it to somebody who's maybe a little more, but rock on. I'm going to someday try to do a rock, composure, and I think that's the thing with rock. It could mean almost anything.
Yeah, it's like, would you consider Bitches Brew rock?
It's a fair question.
Yeah, it gets really into the grayness of music. I mean, a lot of people talk about what was the first punk album, right? And you hear people talk about like The Clash, right?
Yeah.
London Calling, and you're like, oh, really? But it's like, well, this goes back to what we just talked about. Everything is a building block. So there's so much intertwining. So I can imagine as a musician, you're cringe when you hear we all try to simplify everything by putting everything in these boxes.
Yeah, it's like, what's the point? Like, why? Like, it doesn't change what it is. It still is just music.
Fair.
Very true.
Yeah.
And actually, speaking on that, because I'm you mentioned the Beatles, and you're talking about musicians that I think and I associate their greatness with the chemistry that they have with one another. And what I found really interesting is when I went and saw you in Vancouver, Washington, you and your group were awesome. I mean, it sounded like to me you'd been performing together for years. But what I found out talking with Zach is that you might be given a set list and a group of people, and you might have never worked with them before. Can you talk about that? I mean, is that really true?
Yeah, that happens all the time. Like, somebody will call me or text me, like, hey, can you do this gig at this time, at this place? And it'll be somebody that I've never even met before. But, like, they had gotten my name and number from somebody else that I know. And, you know, if I can do it, I'll say yes. And then sometimes they'll send me a set list. Sometimes they don't. And I just show up. And it might be people I know. It might be people I don't know. But most people who play, you know, improvised bass music play songs out of a certain songbook, like the American songbook, you could call it, which is like 200 or 300 standards that people play all the time. And so they'll just call songs, and you either know it or you'll have to like look at a chart on your phone or something. And like there's apps with just all the standards in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done it so much, it's not really stressful, and everybody has the same, a similar mindset in what they want for songs, because there's certain famous recordings of songs, or if they want something different, they'll tell you ahead of time, and it just goes how it goes, because it's all mostly improvised. So,
yeah,
you don't really need rehearsals.
And so at that point, you just need to feel off of these people you've never actually met before, right?
Yeah.
And is that what you're doing?
Basically, yeah. You're listening to what they're doing, they're listening to what you're doing, and hopefully reacting. Sometimes that doesn't happen.
So I feel like that's something is maybe a trope. I don't know if it's a trope or not, but I've seen like certain movies, right, where somebody's just like, all right, I'm going to play some music. You follow me on C major. Is that something where you're just like, yeah, that's what we do? Or is that like, holy shit, like, no, nobody could possibly do that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Essentially, yeah, like, with playing standards, there'll be a set of chord changes and a melody. Sometimes the chord changes are not even set in stone between people, but the melody usually is. So, like, for instance, somebody's like, oh, let's play Autumn Leaves. And they'll play the melody, or their interpretation of the melody, and you'll play the changes, or your interpretation of the changes. So it kind of really depends on the person, more so than the music, which is what's cool about it, because having different combinations of people produces a completely unique sound because of their preferences and like their tendencies in improvisation.
And with that too, like realistically, you could never probably reproduce that same exact sound again if you ever needed to, even, right?
Yeah, it's always different.
Yeah,
which is what's awesome about it. You know,
I think that's what makes live music so fun. Is you never can repeat what you heard.
Yeah,
if you wanted to, it's not like Coca-Cola where you know it's always going to taste like Coca-Cola.
But I'd argue, I saw something the other day that was pretty poignant. They said Coca-Cola does taste different. You look at where you get it. So like McDonald's Coca-Cola, that's pretty on point. But you get Coca-Cola some other places. You just don't know what you're getting.
All right, Ron, you had to ruin my analogy.
Sorry.
Different ratios, different ages of syrups, different water.
Right. There is something to that.
Nothing is,
that's
I guess,
really
is
cool,
ever the same. I guess nothing
but,
is ever the same.
I remember when I heard that, it just blew my mind, Liam, because I'm not a professional musician by any stretch, but I never realized that you could be working with strangers, more or less, and yet create music together in a beautiful way. So I think that takes a lot of, we always think about improv. We think about it in the context of, at least I do, in terms of like whose line is it anyway, right? In more of a comedy sense. But there's also a level of improv in a music standpoint, right? That's very, how do we make sure that we're harmonizing together? Even ending at the same time, right?
That's a lot of the time. That's the hardest part, is ending in the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, that guy's been going on a 7-minute guitar solo. When's this thing going to wrap up?
Oh, that's when you don't hire him again.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, Liam, I want to talk about some weird stuff. I want to talk about some UFOs, maybe some extraterrestrial stuff, and then I also hear you have some exciting music that you're actually producing and making, so I want to talk about that as well. So we'll be right back.
Hey, I know what you're thinking. Right now might be a good time to go and get a quick break, but here's the thing. I'm thinking that you could also use this as a good opportunity to like, subscribe, and drop a comment on this video. It would help us. It would also get the search algorithms to make sure that this video pops up for more people. So we'd really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Thank you so much. Bye.
And we are back with Liam Hathaway. We were just talking a lot about music. I want to get into some extraterrestrial stuff. But before we do that, Liam was graciously, I don't know the words, I'm still a little speechless. Out in Oregon, he picked up, well, I guess it was technically in Washington State, right?
Yeah.
You picked up a bottle of Malort, and you know what? Let's have another shot. Let's have another shot of Malort, the official spirit, the official beer drink of Between Two Studs. Cheers, Liam.
Cheers.
Is it better the second time?
Definitely, I can taste more of it now.
It's getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I kind of get that grapefruit flavor now.
Yeah.
Totally.
Once you kind of have that in your head, you definitely taste it more and more as you have more of it, which is pretty cool. Because you can tell, like, your brain is trying to do some weird associations, like, what does it taste like? And yeah, that grapefruit just keeps coming to mind, and it really kind of does fit it in a nice way. So, well, very cool. I'm glad you really like it.
Yeah, I do.
He'll be getting his second bottle soon enough.
That he will.
So Liam, before we got on the show, we were doing a little prep talk, and you had mentioned that you've had some extraterrestrial experiences. We have to talk about that. Ron and I have not heard anything about this. We said, let's save it for the air. Mm-hmm. Liam, talk to us.
So I've had 4 different experiences. My first one was up in Lake Mayfield, Washington. My grandma's sister and her husband own a bunch of property up there, and they have this like little lakeside property right next to the lake. You have to drive down this winding road, and it's in a forest. And I was with one of my cousins and my brother, and this is when I was maybe 12 years old or something, and we were camping down next to the lake there, and it'd become nighttime. I was laying in my cot in the back of the truck, and my brother and my cousin were over by the lakeside, and they were shouting over to me saying, like, you got to come over here, you got to come see this, like, we're seeing all this stuff, these lights floating around. And apparently they were seeing like a bunch of lights across the lake kind of dancing around and making shapes. And I was so freaked out, I couldn't move. I was just laying in my cot looking up through the trees at the sky, and I was just kind of petrified. And while they were over there watching that stuff, a big saucer flew directly over the trees, like maybe, I don't know, 10 to 50 feet above the tops of the trees and like directly overhead me. Just very slowly, no sound. It was just like in the movies. Big round saucer, white light in the middle, white lights around the edges. It was probably, I don't know, 50 to 100 feet wide. And it just slowly drifted over and went out over the lake. And they saw it too. And it just made me even more petrified. I just kind of laid there.
I bet.
You know, didn't know what to think.
So after you saw that, okay, maybe you got some sleep, you reflect on it a couple days later. I mean, how do you explain that?
I mean, it's hard for me to even believe that it happened because it seems so unreal. Like, it's like, did that even happen? Like, was I imagining that? But like, I know I saw it, you know, and my brother and my cousin had seen it too. So like, it's kind of surreal to think back on it because it feels like it almost didn't even happen. Like it was something I saw in a movie or something, but like I remember seeing it. And then,
so I've heard, especially in kind of like the Northwest, there's definitely some weird activity from what I've heard. And I've heard that some of that has to do with like either like there's like a location to like nuclear power plants and there's a location to like military bases. Was this close to any of those types of facilities? Do you know?
I mean, it was in central Washington, so there is, I don't remember the name of the military base, but there is a very large military complex just north of where I was.
Okay.
And I was very close to like Mount St. Helens too.
Interesting.
Yeah, in that same area, my cousin who lives there in Mossy Rock, he's seen stuff multiple times around the dam that's around there, and like before and after this event. I don't know what attracts them, but
yeah, I think we were talking with one of our guests, or maybe I picked this up somewhere on the internet. I think one of the theories is that at least with the military base and some of the major like power infrastructure, there's kind of like almost a warning or message to more or less if we start kind of doing some more malicious kind of scary things with like, for instance, nuclear weapons, it's more or less to kind of, just so you guys know, we're not going to let you do that kind of thing. And apparently there's definitely been some really kind of weird glitches with the military where they see stuff like maybe something was going to go off or whatever, and all of a sudden just kind of gets killed. And there's been some speculation that maybe that's part of the reason why they're doing what they're doing or why they're in those areas.
Well, but Ron, let's I haven't heard that, but let's flesh that out a little bit.
Sure.
That would to me, that would mean that they are a custodian or some type of governing body. Like, why would they care if we kill ourselves? Right? Like, why would they care if we launch a nuclear missile from Washington State and attacked somewhere in the Middle East or Russia or wherever, unless they feel some type of guardianship over us?
Is it empathy?
That's where I've heard. Well, that's why I've heard that. I don't know. Maybe we're kind of going down a bit of a rat hole here, but I love
let's
it.
go down that. Let's go down.
So, from what I've heard, I think that there's speculation that there's more than one type of extraterrestrial. There is one that tends to be more benevolent, and then there's one that's more malicious. And I want to say, like, the more malicious one, I want to say that's maybe the reptilians or something. And then I think that there's, like, the grays that I think they're... And I could be confusing some of this. I need to probably go do a Wikipedia search after this. But there's speculation that there's some... And I want to say, like, some of it has to do with, like, even the shapes of their vehicles. There's, like, the circular ones, but you also have, like, the more cigar-shaped ones. There's just different... And supposedly that has to do something with at least the ones that are around, like the power and military bases. They're more or less there. They're trying. I've heard that the speculation is that, and again, I'm just probably going down a huge rat hole. they had, as a species, gotten to a point where they're having trouble with reproducing. They're kind of at the end of their civilization, and they're trying to kind of work with humans to kind of more or less get some breeding stock or something to kind of help with saving their race, and then also helping the human race to kind of get elevated. And that's where, from what I've heard on the other end, there's the reptilians, I think, that don't want any of that. They're kind of at war, and they're just kind of like here to just cause and stir the shit up. And they tend to do more malicious things, such as the abductions and other weird things. But then I've also heard that the abductions might be related to the Greys too. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just pulling all this stuff out of my butt. So
No, I haven't done a lot of research because I feel like there's a lot of false information out there, and information you don't know. There's no credibility to it.
Right.
And so I tend to stray away from making any sort of conclusions or guesses about anything because there's no way to know. I just know what I saw, but like I have no
Alex,
idea.
you're muted. We can't hear you right now.
I apologize. We sound like when you hear people talk about this stuff, there's that little part of you that goes, they're crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Ron, you're talking about reptilians, right? I'm like, he's my brother, who I've known my whole life. He's a little crazy. But it's like, no, like, people have seen this. Even our own government has acknowledged that there are things that they don't understand that's flying through the sky that they can't determine, they can't explain what it is.
I kind of attribute like alien stuff like that to almost like the evidence that there is for a god. Like, there is no conclusive evidence, but people believe it, and people say they've seen what they've seen, and that it happens with both sides, with UFOs and with, people speaking to God or whatever.
Right.
And so it's like, it's hard to draw any sort of conclusions because there's no scientific evidence on any of it.
Right.
So you're equating UFOs to religion in that there's a faith element.
Yeah, because there's no solid proof or evidence.
Which I think is kind of like ghosts too. Like, that's another thing where how do you prove it? And I think most of the evidence that you've seen has been like, okay, you can't prove it, but then there's a lot of people, and look at how many shows are on, like, reality TV trying to show, hey, I'm at this old prison, I'm at this old asylum, listen to this weird audio glitch. And maybe it's something, but it's tough to know definitively. And I think even with like the government, I think the like with some of the what they've released with like pictures of like these airplanes or flying vehicles is like, all right, here's our vehicle, and it's maybe almost just recently declassified, and it's going, I don't know, Mach 2 or something. And then you look at this other vehicle, it's going like Mach 8 or something, and it's just like, how is it even managing to do that with physics?
Yeah, there was a 60 Minutes piece that was all about UFOs, all this information that has just very recently been declassified. And they have all these people who were pilots, and, and they, to be a pilot in these fighter jets, you have to be of incredible sound of mind. I mean, they try to break you. And they all are like, no, I saw it. I was sober. I experienced it. There is no explanation for it. And how do we interpret that? And in the 60 Minutes piece, which I recommend everyone check out, they were like worst case scenario. Like, we almost want it to be, because worst case scenario would be like the Russians or like the Chinese, right? And it's like they have technology that is so much far further advanced than anything we have, right? So it's almost like best case scenario, it's UFOs. But then the question becomes, if they're so technologically advanced, why? Okay, so I can understand maybe the argument that you have the Guardian theory, right? The Guardian, like, we're here to protect Earth for some reason. But then, okay, let's go with that reptilian thing. If they really want to, just kind of watch the world burn, why are they taking people up one by one and anal probing them? Like, if you really have that level of power, I think you can do a lot more damage if that's what you're trying to accomplish, right?
I mean, flipping it around, look at how many kids with a magnifying glass hurt ants. Like, could do certainly more and certainly do better things, but there is a certain weird doing malicious things. I don't know.
Anal probing one at a time is more satisfying, is what you're saying.
I'm sure it comes as a shock to the recipient.
I'm a little more inclined to believe that they're just observing. Like, what would we do if we were able to go to another planet that had life on it and have scientists run these missions? You know, we would be observing. I don't think we would be interacting very much or trying to prevent things or whatever. We would just be watching and studying. So that's kind of what I think the purpose behind, you know, them visiting us is. And, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, like you were saying, it's the military running weird crafts and operations and stuff. But, you know, when have we ever seen any technology anywhere close to that? You know, crafts that can speed up and slow down almost instantaneously and have no exhaust or sound. You know, it's insane. Like, if that technology was made by humans, it would have been leaked in some sort of way. You know, we would know something about it.
Right, and that speaks to, it's funny, recently read a book by the late Stephen Hawking, and he actually talks about aliens, and one of his things that he mentions in there is he said, what's interesting is that if you look at history, governments have typically had a pretty horrible record of keeping secrets. And so he's kind of like, even if the U.S. government or whatever government was in on it, to the point of how long could they possibly keep that from the people is really a good question. Because you'd have somebody leak something at some point, right?
Yeah. And with so many people seeing these things, like, you'd think somebody would know something about it conclusively if it had to do with, you know, human technology.
And if you also have that much advanced technology, you would think at some point there would be kind of a, hey, this is why we're here, or, you know, don't worry, or I don't know, something. There's got to be better ways to communicate with us besides, I don't know, flying over and being like, hey, there's Liam. Let's freak the hell out of him and his friends, right?
Liam, though, I do want to get back to something you said, because I think it's interesting. Let's change the narrative on its head. If humanity got to a point where we were sophisticated enough that we saw a primitive society, we were able to get off this earth, we were able to go to a primitive society where they have natural resources that we could find useful. Let's just go with that assumption. They have water, minerals, metals, and let's say they're living in the Stone Age, right? They're living in caves and carving stuff in the walls and stuff. Would we leave them alone? I would like to think the answer is yes. I would like to say, yes, of course, we would only be observers. But if we put ourselves in that situation, would we not, as humans do frequently, wage war for resources? Destroy?
I mean, I would like to say I would think we would leave him alone, like you were agreeing with, but, you know, probably most likely not. It kind of depends on that.
Right, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we would rape and pillage. I hate to say it.
Yeah, because that's kind of human nature.
Then you go in and it's like, check what I've got. I've got this weapon that can do this. It's my boomstick. Worship me. And I think that's actually, there's a book that I read about that whole thing. Is called Chariot of the Gods. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of that. But
who's that by? That's
I forget. I want to say it's in the 70s, but more or less like
I know that book. Yeah.
Yeah, more or less like the short version of the book is that there's a lot of things about ancient civilizations, specifically in like Mesoamerica, where you see what would kind of possibly be considered as like spaceship, possibly like spacesuit kind of things, and that's all in a lot of the art really far back that it's supposed to be related to the gods. And even like the Nazca lines are believed to be possibly some kind of a message or signal to send to these otherworldly visitors, which if we didn't know any better, if we were in that kind of the Stone Age kind of mentality and you see somebody land with a ship, you would think that they were gods. And how would you portray them?
Well, we would be if we in this scenario.
Yeah.
When you are so technologically superior, and not just technologically superior, you're also much more advanced from a scientific standpoint, and from a total knowledge standpoint. You are a god, maybe a lowercase g.
Yep.
Right, but you're a god, and so what do you not the Earth as we know it has never played God to anything other than animals on Earth. We've never played God to another civilization.
Yeah.
How would that work out? And maybe the answer is it would not be good. And we're lucky that we have gods, and I say the lower G. We have gods in the sky who are patrolling, who are maybe protecting us for some reason.
Yeah, and that kind of circles back to what I was saying, like how they're equivalent to like a god complex, like that we could view them as gods based on how they appear and how mysterious they are, And I'm sure there are people out there that do view them as gods. Because I think they have some powers that like people don't even talk about. Like in some other experiences that I've had interacting with UFOs, like and other friends and family that I've had experiences, like there's some sort of, it seems like there's some sort of preventative thing that keeps you from filming them or recording them or like calling somebody during that time. Like I had an interaction with one, like I think it was my most recent one, is like 2 years ago, and I was with my friend and my brother. We had just pulled the tractor out of the shed and we were cleaning it. It's an old tractor, and we saw this light come over the mountain, just like a blue orb, and it would just dip really quickly, and then it would fly over the mountain and behind it and come back in a matter of seconds and change direction erratically. But all of our phones wouldn't work. Like, I was trying to take out my phone and film it, but like it was glitching out, and like there was also some sort of feeling that I shouldn't film it. And so none of us ended up filming it.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened to my brother. He had an experience. This was on my grandma's farm. He had an experience a few years before that where they were like trying to film it, but there was something keeping them from filming it. So I think there's some sort of weird preventative thing they have, and like where they're able to. This kind of makes me sound crazy, but I feel like where they're like able to kind of control what your inclinations to do things, like.
But Liam,
control
this
what
is
you
why
want to do.
This is why people don't generally talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Is because you sound like a crazy person. I'm not saying you. I'm saying when you talk about stuff like this, and so I think people are guarded, and it is interesting though, because I think a lot of people can say, "Oh, it's all hogwash," and what I mean by all, I mean aliens, ghosts, everything, right? But when you start saying, "Well, there's some validity to one of those things," I don't know if there are aliens. Who's to say there aren't ghosts?
Well, especially too when you've got, it's not just an isolated case of a single person saying, "Oh yeah, I saw this." You've kind of got these reports all over the world, and you've got them from people who are very credible. You've got varying degrees of evidence but we're still just kind of all collectively, what does it mean? And how do you know what's maybe military versus what really is unknown? It's just tough to know.
Hey, on a lighter note, Liam, you live in the Pacific Northwest, known as Sasquatch country. Have you or anyone you know ever had a run-in with Sasquatch?
Not that I know of, no.
That's a shame.
Bummer.
You know what?
Bummer.
There actually
That's
is a
the one I
Sasquatch
want.
museum in Georgia that I've been to. Not too far from here either.
You know, if there's a Sasquatch run, no offense, Sasquatch is not in Georgia. If
might
there's
be.
a Sasquatch, he's in the Pacific Northwest or like Alberta, Canada. Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
Well-
to me, if I'm a giant, like 10-foot tall monkey thing, that's where I'm going to be.
Let's just agree that he's hanging out somewhere that's out of focus. Can we agree on that?
That's the scary part about Sasquatch. He is naturally out of focus.
Yeah.
I'm stealing that from Mitch Hedberg.
Who's to say it's a singular being? Maybe it's a whole species.
Yeah.
Species of Sasquatch.
I feel like that would be more likely, but I'm still inclined to believe that they don't exist. But that's just because I don't know anybody who I trust who's had experiences with that.
But if someone you knew, if someone you trusted, said, "Listen, I was hiking, I saw Sasquatch," would you? You'd have to start thinking maybe Sasquatch is real.
Yeah, then I would consider it. Yeah.
So, fun fact: Ron used to be known as Sasquatch. That was his thing. But as far as I know, my brother is not related to
No.
the Sasquatch people.
And I've never had any run-ins with the Squatch, unfortunately. But who knows? Someday, maybe.
So, listen, we could talk about this all day. It's fun. We'll never know the answer. Well, I don't think we're ever going to know the answer, but maybe we will. We'll have to have a part 2 at some point. But what I want to do with the last part of this segment, Liam, is I really want to talk about you and some of the creative work that you're working on right now. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I have an album that I've been working on for about a year now. I'm kind of a procrastinator, so I haven't been doing the work that I need to do on it, but I'm hoping to release it in the next couple weeks. So by the time this show comes out, I'll probably release it on Bandcamp. It's going to be entitled The Farm, and it's kind of an ode to my grandma's farm that we lost. So the story behind it is I had a couple of my good friends who are also musicians. It was like a couple weeks before we lost the farm. Mm-hmm. I had them come out there and bring some recording equipment, and we just recorded some music, some improvised stuff and some standards. And my friend Wes is on piano. He was playing the old piano that's been in that house for a long time.
Oh, cool.
It was.
I just needed some tune-ups.
Yeah, I tried to tune it. I got it a little better, but it's definitely out of tune in the recordings. But it kind of gives it some charm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool to have that instrument in there. And then my friend Carlos on drums. We just recorded it in the living room of my grandma's house. And then, there's a few pieces on there that are trio, and then there's a few tracks that are I'm just improvising on the piano. And then there's a track on there where we walked over to my neighbor's barn, and I had my trombone. We brought some percussion instruments, and we just improvised some stuff. And I kind of pieced it together. So that's another piece that's on there, and then it's kind of just. It's very special to me because it's an ode to that place, which has always been a part of me growing up, mm-hmm. and a part of my family. So, I'm hope to release that soon. So, watch out for that.
And probably by the time this episode airs, it'll be launched by that point. And in which case, what we'll do too is we'll also provide a link in our episode description, so you can go check it out for yourself. we're looking forward to checking it out.
Cool.
Yeah, please keep us updated on that and any other work that you ultimately do. I think that's really cool, and we love to promote the work that our guests have, the creative spirit of them, to anyone who's listening who have a connection with you. So I'm looking forward to that, and so that should be out hopefully by you're saying the end of March, around the time that this episode airs.
Yeah, around that time. Yeah.
Terrific. Well, we will absolutely link to that in the episode.
Cool. Sounds good.
Well, honestly, with that, this has been a real delight, Liam. It's funny. You never know. You walk into a bar 1,500 miles away from where you live, and you meet somebody, and then a couple weeks later, they're on your podcast. So you never know how things work out. Say hello to random people, folks. You never know. So it's been a real delight, Liam. Thank you so much for being a terrific, very interesting guest. And with that, we'll wrap up the episode.
Thank you guys so much. I had a good time.
Thank you. We did too.